Clarence Thomas, who finally admitted that he is a sugar baby and his sugar daddy is conservative billionaire Harlan Crow, who loves to collect Nazi memorabilia, who I'm pretty sure once upon a time, my dear old cousin who argued that what Israel's doing is legally killing children, also wrote a piece in defense of Harlan Crow's penchant for collecting Nazi memorabilia. Really cool guy.
The Supreme Court chose not to issue key rulings on abortion, access, guns, or presidential immunity. And it's been roughly 2 weeks since we learned that the Alitos foisted an inverted flag and an appeal to heaven flag, both of which were carried by insurrectionists outside the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Normal, very normal, very good for a Supreme Court justice to have these flags. Nothing concerning there whatsoever.
Recently, we've received regular reminders of how Donald Trump and Leonard Leo, a longtime pal of Clarence Thomas, have successfully built a conservative federal judiciary with a deep bench and feeder system supported by a big donor network that regularly wines and dines these judges. Leo's stated goal with all of this corrupt, incestuous behavior is to defeat, quote, unchurched and vile, immoral, current-day barbarians, secularists, whom the devil is using to move society away from its natural order, unquote.
The devil.
Huffington Post uncovered the latest example of that rotten playbook in
Watch
action.
out for the devil.
Down in Florida back in 2022 during the tail end of the COVID pandemic, an underqualified Trump-nominated judge issued a ruling against mask mandates. This judge used a weird, never-used legal theory that you could word search like key phrases and apply the old-timey meanings to provide legitimacy to the ruling. And guess where this judge got this legal theory? At a Koch-funded, all-expenses-paid luxury trip where the primary mission was persuading federal judges to adopt this arcane theory. And guess who the judge clerked for? You guessed it, Clarence Thomas. Today, Fix the Court reported that according to their tally, Justice Thomas has received the most gifts of any judge dating back to the Antonin Scalia era during his time on the court.
Also, all the judges combined, not just any judge, but you combine the gifts of all these judges, and it's still not what Clarence Thomas has gotten from his very generous zaddy.
By a mile, with 193 gifts, totaling more than $4 million. I'm joined now by Ellie Mastal, justice correspondent for The Nation. So at this point, Ellie, I guess they just take all the 30-year-old right-wing college graduates from Liberty University and just send them on fancy trips, and then they're Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, right. I mean, look, I think it's important for people to ask, what are these people paying for, right?
Yeah.
What are they getting for their $4 million they've given to Clarence Thomas over the past 20 years?
Also, the $4 million included travel to Bali, food and lodging in Sonoma County, California, like traveling on private planes, et cetera, just very, very ritzy trips. And Clarence has officially disclosed these luxury vacations that were paid for by Harlan Crow, which he had not acknowledged previously in the official record because he claims he had been told that he didn't need to, and also claims that it's fine because Harlan Crow didn't have any business before the court. So he's like, no, it's not a conflict of interest. Like, I didn't have to report this under federal ethics laws. It's just personal hospitality from a close personal friend who did this out of the goodness of his heart because of our personal connection. But that's actually not true. Like, he's just straight up lying that this had nothing to do with Harlan Crow's business interests, because Harlan Crow is a part of a group called Club for Growth, which has lobbied the Supreme Court previously. And Clarence Thomas, during these years that he has been so nicely treated to these very lavish vacations, was on the Supreme Court as this group that Harlan Crow was is a part of brought their business in front of the court. Like, he was on the bench. And in addition, Harlan Crow has been connected to several groups that over the years have lobbied the Supreme Court through so-called amicus briefs that provide legal arguments supporting a plaintiff or defendant. And there are just multiple connections between Harlan Crow's business dealings and the Supreme Court. And it doesn't take a fucking genius to understand that obviously he was paying for Clarence Thomas, for the relationship with Clarence Thomas. Like, yeah, duh. That is how politics goes. It's just that the Supreme Court, because of how few ethics rules are in place and how there's really not proper legislation to try and prevent this kind of stuff or hold these Supreme Court justices accountable for reporting these things. Clarence Thomas got away with this for years. It wasn't until ProPublica published their reporting last year that detailed everything that Thomas has received from Harlan Crow, who is also a Republican mega donor.
And what they're getting, just to link your last segment together, what they're getting is what Byron Donalds wants. What they're getting is Jim Crow, right? What they're getting is a guy like Clarence Thomas, who, like Byron Donalds, entire judicial philosophy is that, well, some Negroes are magic, right? No matter what the white man does to us, we can just rise above as long as they don't shoot us or kill us or rape us or drown us. Right? And if you tell people that, if you're black, if you're Donalds, if you're Thomas, and you tell white people that, they will give you money. And that is what's happened to Clarence Thomas for 20 years. He has told white folks exactly what they want to hear, ruled exactly as they would like him to rule, and done it as their black friend. And so the money is just pouring out. And you see it in these reports where, again, Clarence Thomas, in the figures that we saw today, Sam Alito made like $200,000 over the past, disclosed gifts over the past 20 years. Antonin Scalia, the hero of their movement, again around $200,000. Clarence Thomas, $4 million. That's why Tim Scott exists. That's why Byron Donald exists. That's why Candace Owens exists, because the grift is good. There's a lot of money in telling white folks what they need to hear.
It is amazing, because when I looked at the chart, it was like, I thought that Clarence Thomas's was the total, because it was so much bigger. Anthony Scalia, like you said, is six figures. He's in the 2, the 3 to 4. This guy is, and you're right, it is a thing that the right is willing to pay extra to get women, and especially black people, to tell them what they want to hear about women and black people. Tell them that black people don't want to be able to have a fearless fund. They shouldn't be able to give 20. I wanted, if I had time, to ask him if he supported the fearless fund being not able to give grants out. I'm sure he does, because that's what he's supposed to say.
I mean, look, it makes me I looked at that chart today. I look at people like Donaldson and think, man, I made the wrong financial choices in my life, right? Because there's money out there for these people, but always remember, and I just want folks to remember this, they're getting something for their money.
Yes, they are.
This isn't charity, right? They're getting rulings, they're getting opinions, they're getting the kind of return to not 1950s, but
just so you know, the extent and frequency of Harlan Crow's gifts to Clarence Thomas have no known precedent in the modern history of the U.S. Supreme Court. Like, there are rotten Supreme Court justices and have been, but nobody has ever, to this level, to $4 million. $4 million is an insane amount of money. Has ever received this amount of gifts from private donors.
To the 1850s that they want for their funds. And if we, the rest of us who are not making it, the other funny thing is that, you saw like the liberals like Sotomayor had like a bunch of gifts, but they were clearly all like $5, right? People are giving, like, here's a flower, Sonia. Like, that's what she was getting, right? So all of us who don't have the money to buy our own Supreme Court justices, what we need to do is use what power we have, the power we didn't have during the Jim Crow
selling
South,
out for millions.
and go out and vote for people who are going to hold the Supreme Court justices to heal through ethics legislation and other reforms. Hank Johnson, congressman from Georgia, my man, he's got an ethics bill right now on the House floor. We need to vote for people who are going to support that bill, and ask our political leaders when we go to vote, are you going to support ethics reform?
Yes.
No more
Right.
nice letters, all right? No more like, oh, we're not, no more of that stuff. Are you going to support the bills to stop these people from graft?
Amen.
Like, it's insane that you can serve on the highest court in this country, one where there is no term limit. Like, you're on it, baby, and have your lifestyle be subsidized by rich Republican mega donors who have business dealings with your court. Like, it is fucking shameful. And it also highlights how problematic the lack of ethics laws around the Supreme Court is. It's like this idea of, oh, well, the Supreme Court doesn't need it because they're the highest court in the land and they're like God and they wouldn't violate ethics. They would not go against long-held precedents. Fuck that. Are you kidding? How can you have confidence in a system that runs this way? You can't.
Brother, Ellie Mustal, who understands what Jim Crow was and also what the grift looks like, because the grift is good for Clarence and them. Thank you very much, Ellie Mustal.
It is absolutely shameful that this has just been allowed to go on for
We did not get a decision in the Donald Trump
years.
Immunity case today. It has now been 6 weeks
So
since the Supreme
corrupt.
Court
Can you
heard
muster
arguments
a war
on Trump's
cry?
claim of
It's a big joke.
what is
It's not
playing?
really, though. I mean, it
Oh,
is,
I
but
was
it is.
like, why am I hearing his fucking voice?
absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for his attempt to steal the 2020 election. This means the court is delaying it, and they know that that inevitably helps Trump. What makes this all the more preposterous is that 2 justices should have recused themselves from the immunity case already. One, Samuel Alito, who had 2 different coup flags flying outside his 2 homes, and Clarence Thomas, whose wife testified to the January 6th committee about her efforts in support of
Yes.
the coup. And that is just the
Yes. Ginny Thomas, who you think Clarence Thomas is bad. Ginny Thomas is the fucking devil. And she was involved with January 6th, the January 6th attempt to do an insurrection, to overturn the election results. And every time Clarence Thomas has faced pressure to recuse himself on cases that involve his wife's involvement on January 6th, he's refused to do so. And there's nothing legally that can prevent him from serving on the court during these cases. He can sit on the bench, absolutely, because the whole idea is like, you're supposed to just do it yourself. We're supposed to trust these Supreme Court justices to know when there's a conflict of interest, when there's an ethics concern. But nope, there's nothing that can actually stop them from sitting on the bench.
first level at which this court is so deeply compromised. New data out today from Fix the Court takes a look at the value of gifts to justices over the past 20 years, both disclosed and then undisclosed gifts that were subsequently reported out. To take you through just a handful that give you a sense, Justice Elena Kagan's calculated to have received gifts valued at just under $1,200. That's over 20 years. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg over $59,000. Again, over 20 years, $3,000 a year.
RBG Wakanda.
Now, Justice Samuel Alito taking quite a bit more, $170,000 over 20 years. But none of that is in the zip code of the ballpark of Justice Clarence Thomas, whose gifts totaled over $4 million. To give you a sense of how that looks in chart form, take a look. Can you see where Justice Thomas is on that bar chart? The big red bar on the left?
Also, BT Dubs, Harlan Crow met Thomas after he became a Supreme Court justice. Okay. This is not something where they go back to childhood. Most likely in Harlan Crow's childhood that involved dressing up as a child Nazi. And I don't know, doing reenactments. But no, they became friends after Thomas was nominated to the court.
That's Clarence Thomas compared to all the other justices who served during this time. Melissa Murray is a professor at the New York University School of Law, co-host of Strict Scrutiny podcast, along with
Clarence Thomas's mother's house.
She joins me now. I gotta say, at some level, we knew bits and pieces of this. There's been an amazing series of ProPublica articles, some of which
Harlan Crow bought Clarence Thomas's mother's house, and also Harlan Crow gave a $500,000 to a Tea Party group that was founded by one Ginny Thomas, which pays her 6-figure salary.
Won the Pulitzer about all of the gifts that Thomas has gotten. But to see it put out like that, am I wrong? This is a generational scandal for the court.
Oh, 100%. I think you're exactly right. We have seen this sort of trickle out piecemeal, but having it splayed out in the aggregate really does make clear the expanse of the grift. I mean, I think that's the right term for it. It is a grift. If you think about Justice Thomas's salary over the course of his time on the court during this period that's been reported, it's roughly equal to the amount of the gifts that Fix the Court has identified here. I mean, that is actually quite staggering. He's managed to amass 2 distinct income streams.
Yeah, we actually ran the math on this. So the cumulative gross pay over that period is about $4.7 million. The total gifts is over $4 million. He's got 2 masters. He's the servant of 2 masters. He's working for, the American people. And then he's got...
Well, which American people? So let's talk about that because...
Well, he's been getting paid by the taxpayers.
For sure. But, I mean, it has been said that look where your treasure is, for there your heart will be.
Not just after Thomas was nominated, I think it was after he complained about wanting to retire to make more money elsewhere. Yeah, so Supreme Court Justice's base salary a year is $274,000.
Also, and it's not surprising that some of the individuals who have been linked to some of these gifts, like the Koch brothers network, which has had Justice Thomas speak at donor events, for example, happens to be deeply involved in a set of major challenges to the regulatory state. These are cases we're still waiting for the court to decide, but we already know at least where the Koch brothers would like Justice Thomas to be. I guess now we're just waiting to find out have they made enough payments.
I'm sorry, I'm dying. I just found this quote from Clarence Thomas about how he's just an everyman with modest tastes. He said, "I don't have any problem with going to Europe, but I prefer the United States." Really, buddy? Because you took Harlan's private plane to Bali. Okay, whatever. And I prefer seeing the regular parts of the United States. I prefer the RV parks. I prefer the Walmart parking lots to the beaches and things like that. There's something normal to me about it, Thomas said. I come from regular stock and I prefer that. I prefer being around that. You're just an everyman with modest taste. Yeah, nobody's buying up that steaming pile of crap.
It's on it. I don't know.
No,
but that's kind of where all of this is going.
Part of, the argument that people will make in defense of Thomas is that...
And also, you want to know why it's crap? Him saying I'm just a normal guy who likes normal things, saying that he prefers Walmart parking lots. Ain't nobody saying that. Ain't nobody saying they prefer Walmart parking lots.
Well, he was always a conservative anyway, and these are just his friends.
Do you remember the John Oliver vid? Yes.
It's not unconstitutional to have friends, so I want to be very clear about that. You have a right to have friends, even rich friends. But I think where the optics of this become more problematic is that we are seeing individuals essentially donate funds to the court to keep this conservative supermajority in play. I mean, so there's been a lot of reporting, some of it by the New York Times last year, about this Justice Thomas complaining about his small judicial salary, which is actually quite significant relative to what other Americans make, and how maybe he wouldn't stay on the court. And all of these very wealthy interests were like, no, no, no. Let's figure out how to keep you on the court and keep you happy. And suddenly you see the money start rolling in.
This is a really
it's like when Shapiro went to Home Depot, bought one plank of wood.
Just the delay on the immunity case here, because it's not surprising. I think they tipped their hand when they took so long. First, they wouldn't let Jack Smith jump to the Supreme Court, even though we all knew they were going to want to weigh in. Even though they did it on COVID cases, they did it on student debt. Then they took it and they just sat on it for a while before they even announced arguments. Then they announced arguments on the very last day. Now it's been 6 weeks.
Yeah. No, I mean, we knew this. I've said this a million times. By the time the Supreme Court weighs in on this, and I think this court must say at some point that there is no absolute immunity for a president from any criminal liability, but there may be some details about what's private, what's public, what's in the outer scope, the outer perimeter of the president's office. But whatever they do...
A wholly invented doctrine, just to be clear.
To be clear. But whatever they decide, it is purely academic at this point, because they have already, in effect, immunized this defendant, Donald Trump, from liability for these criminal charges. And that's kind of all that matters right now.
I want to also play you this clip from Alito's neighbor who was in the sort of verbal altercation with him and his wife, who gave an interview. And she's making this point about, when the flag went up, Alito says that it was about this verbal altercation. Then he went to a Fox News reporter who just sort of reported exactly what he said and didn't, as far as I can tell, do any additional reporting. Here's his neighbor talking about the verbal back and forth they had.
I just want to emphasize that the interaction that happened on February 15th is the one that they're using as an excuse for why they flew the flag. And I really want to hammer home the fact that that happened on February 15th.
Also, in case you don't know, the upside down U.S. flag is associated with January 6th. And then the appeal to heaven flag is associated with Christian nationalism. So very cool. So awesome to have a Supreme Court justice flying those flags.
And their flag went up 2 or 3 weeks before that.
That date's confirmed by text messages and a police call. Again, this may just be misremembered, but we still don't know why they were flying the flag upside down on Joe Biden's inauguration day, right?
No, we don't.
I think we do.
My colleague at NYU, Ryan Goodman, has actually made a really good point about this. Justice Alito last week issued this letter to Senators Durbin and Whitehouse explaining that he was not going to recuse himself from these January 6th related cases, whether because of this flag or not. He has no obligation to recuse himself. If Ms. Baden is correct that the timeline...
Maybe we need to put something into the fucking Constitution that says these Supreme Court justices aren't in charge of deciding to recuse themselves or not. It's like, yeah, you know what? It's the same as when Israel's like, yeah, we investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing. These Supreme Court justice assholes are like, no, I think I'm good. No conflict of interest here. No.
Is wrong, and it seems like the timeline is wrong. Like there's a real discrepancy between her timeline and Justice Alito's. He's essentially lied to Congress, and Ryan Goodman, my colleague, has suggested maybe that do something about it. Yes. Is something worth investigating as a criminal matter. But there's a lot going on here. We haven't had these cases. Are they waiting because of the proximity of this scandal to those cases? Who knows? If that's the case, then we've already answered our question as to why Justice Alito should recuse, because we're already asking those questions.
Ding, ding, ding.
It's too complicated. It's not impartial.
Melissa Murray,
Scooty
who is fond of flags,
thank you for the gifted subs.
as far as I know.
Flagrantly
Fond of flags.
Ugh. Love the streams. Thanks. Anyway, guys, if you want to be a Supreme Court justice, just get yourself a sugar daddy. You don't have to worry about it. No ethics issues here. There's a code of conduct, but doesn't really do much. There's no way to adequately enforce it. So you can just do whatever the fuck you want. Way ahead of you. Way ahead of you. I'm already on it. Oh, man. I love to hear conservatives talk about corruption. And it's like, do you guys, what do you call this? What do you call this? Just friends? Friends giving friends gifts? Private citizens who are also Supreme Court justices flying whatever flags they want to fly? I feel like $4 million to alter the course of this country for decades is really cheap. Well, you heard Clarence Thomas himself say that he's just an everyman who has modest taste. He doesn't require 50 mil. He likes Walmart parking lots. That's his idea of a good time.